when you drown, it's like if you've been in a swimming pool and somebody's come up to you and yelled in your ear, "Hey, Gaston, let's go get an ice cream cone." Like blah 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 blah. Blah. You can't really understand, and that's what it's like when you drown. Within a second, I was gone, and I knew there was an end, but I couldn't see an end.
This is Eagle Freedom Presents.
At 76 years old, Jay Setchell has endured over 70 surgeries, has had multiple near death experiences, is confined to a wheelchair, and he and his wife are now raising their 8-year-old twin grandchildren. Now, most people at his age are settled into their retirement years, but Jay has no intentions of slowing down. And by the way, I do want to mention that he's also served in the United States Marine Corps. He's here today to talk about grit, earned wisdom, his book, The Strength Within You, and why it's always too soon to quit. Would you please welcome to the show, Jay Setchell? Jay, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dustin, glad to be here, my friend. Good to have you welcome me.
Well, I'll
Thank
tell
you.
you what, I'm glad to have you here. And you know, you really just what we just read there in the beginning. I think most people would have quit by now. But I like your line there that I was too soon to quit. And I don't think that's in your vocabulary.
It's in there more often than I think you'll probably find it later, but it's I've just felt that way. I don't know, it's like you said about a lot of people want to retire. A lot of people have asked me, why don't you just quit or why don't you just I could have quit when I was 41, and it was like you'll see that in the book and because God's got me alive. And that's why if as long as he's given me the breath to breathe and the heart to keep pounding, I'm gonna keep going. I don't care. I'm 95, I don't care.
Right. And I don't see that in you. I don't see quit in you anywhere. I think a lot of that too comes from your background and how you were raised. So let's talk about that. How were you raised in a farm, right?
I raised on a working farm and, a lot of responsibility, a lot of sense of urgency, and I think that and I've responded to this, with the thought before, it's not just a responsibility, it's a sense, um of the changing of the seasons all the time. Because when you got heavy winters and it's 35 below and your springtime, you're prepping your equipment and you're planting your seeds and when you put a seed in, it's this big and you watch it grow and you see the cycle of life. Because throughout the summer it's growing and you're cultivating it or rotary hoeing your crops, you're spraying them if you need to for insecticides or pesticides. It's uh, fall comes around, you harvest and stuff, and, you fill silos, you fill cribs, you combine your corn. But even raising cattle, when you get them and they're smaller, you got to feed them out. You have to get the proper nutrients metered in the proper commercial feed. And so I just think it's a responsibility that, it's like when I was about 5 years old, I was feeding calves, you know, in a nipple bucket, pounding the milk up and, the powdered milk with warm water and in the winter, you drag the bucket through the buckets through the snow, and in the summer, to be dragging them through the grass, but and if I didn't do it, that's where I learned if it is to be, it is up to me,
Mhm.
because I believe that's very important, and my dad would point out certain things like, "It looks like the weeds need to be pulled around the cattle lot fence." Well, I learned that if you wait till it rains and let the rainwater soak in a little bit, they're easy to pull. But he didn't have to tell me again. I just knew, "Oh, looks like the weeds need to be pulled." I just and I raised with good parents. I mean, my mom raised, we had 4 kids and, 2 boys and 2 girls, and she taught piano lessons after in the evening after kids got out of school. She was also a school teacher. My dad was always on the board of education or the president of the board and he started other companies as well. So I learned a lot of it from him and from my mom because that it was just, very we were fortunate, but people can say, well, you had airplanes, you did agriculture spraying and stuff like that. Yeah, well, but they were like a combine. You only used them when you needed them. They were a tool, and but people don't understand it. It takes a lot to keep that kind of a operation going. You got hundreds and hundreds of head of cattle a year and lots of crops. And when I was in high school, I worked. I worked nights at the Ford garage halfway through my sophomore year. Then I worked in a small agriculture factory making grain dryers and stuff. And I started school got out at 3:45, and I started work at 4 o'clock. And I worked till 12:30 every night. I get home, I get to bed about 1 o'clock, and I get back up at 5:30 to help my dad with the chores, my chores, his chores, all the stuff. Because my dad was always time is money and money is time. And and if I helped him in the morning, he would do my chores for me in the evening because I had 40 head of cattle and I think 80 or 86 head of hogs when I was a junior and senior, and he would take care of that for me. But if I didn't help him, he would charge me for his time.
Wow, that's interesting.
Well, because money is time and time is money. There's a responsibility. So if I want to get up and help, and so it never bothered me. I just realized that that's what it takes in life. You can lay there and if you want, you're not gonna. Then you always those people always look and go, well, I wonder how come they've got this or how come they've done that or how come and we didn't have any extra stuff. We didn't have toys. We never took vacations. I didn't know what vacation I didn't know how to spell the word vacation because you gotta be there for your crops and your cattle.
Right, right.
But that was basically it, and then that from that into the Marine Corps.
Yeah, so and one of the things I when reading about you and reading some of the book about you is you were always looking for something else to do,
Mm,
another way of earning money because you got that from your dad. You like you mentioned, your dad did several side businesses,
yes.
got them from going. So you obviously got that from him. And you were always looking for ways to get some money. And what are some of those jobs that you ventured into at the young ages? What did you discover? What did you find?
Well, I mean, it was fun to me because we had 3 acres, and we couldn't really farm. It was kind of on a back corner of a field, and it was separated by a little creek, and part of the time, the creek was live, and sometimes it wasn't, and so we just didn't bother farming it. So I would sprinkle and plant seeds for the little gourds you see at Thanksgiving time or at Halloween time, and I would harvest them, and it didn't take anything. You sowed the seeds and let them go, and you'd sprinkle them once in a while, maybe hoe some weeds. But I'd put them in bags. I put like 4 in a bag or 5 in a bag for 50 cents or 40 cents. And then my mom went in and we talked to Mr. Klassen, who had class in his grocery store, and he said, "Oh, I'll take all that you can bring me." So I took those little netted bags that we got. And I think they were 2 cents a piece, and you put gourds in it, and you get 40 cents or 45 cents. I don't remember what it was 'cause I know they sold them for like a dollar or 95 cents. Now that was like in 1957, 58, 59, back in those days, but, and I'd ride a bicycle and sell packets of seeds to neighboring farmers, and I'd ask them, "Hey, you got any extra work you can use me for?" Cribbing corn or shelling corn or baling hay or disking plowing. By then I was 10, 11. Then I started taking my dad's pickup truck and, you know, I didn't usually ask him, I just took it. I mean,
I
if
think
I
I think
asked
that
him,
happens with a lot of us.
I think if I woulda asked him, but and I don't, when I was in high school, I found a way to lift a car that was sitting in the back down a little bit, and I went to the Beer Works junkyard in Mendota, and for a dollar a piece, I bought these coil springs. Well, when you raise your car up by the bumper, it stretches the frame and the body apart, and I tack welded them up underneath the frame, and I would center them over the axle. And so when I set it down, it was raised up, it was level. It might even be a little bit high in the back end, maybe, but it would bounce a little bit, but not bad. And then when I did that, and I had other friends that wanted it, and the neighboring towns were all close, and it was like a little business, and putting in speakers and stuff like it just so much of it's basically simple. They got 2 wires. You run the wires and you just pull a fuse out. In the old days, you used to wrap the wire around the fuse and pop the fuse back in, and you got speakers. It's like it wasn't a big deal, but it was fun, and I enjoyed it, and it profited too.
You obviously learned a lot being on the farm. What's your biggest thing that you came away with that really stuck with you in life?
A good question. I'd probably say always be prepared because be prepared for the crops, be prepared for what could be wrong with the cattle, problems that could happen mechanically, be prepared for changes in the weather that you weren't expecting. I think be prepared and be ready to act. Be responsible enough to, notice that the cattle that got their tails turned to the northwest. Well, that doesn't mean today, but within the next day or two, you're probably going to have a storm come out of the northwest. I would say that that's probably it. The responsibility and be prepared. Always, it's like back in the Marine Corps and for you in the Navy, it was always preventive maintenance. Check your oil, check your water, check this, check that, check the air in the tire before you start the vehicle and go out and burn it up. Just make sure it's there. It should be. It probably is, but I think that's it.
So you were kinda just always had, like, I guess maybe another way of putting it is, like, you always had a plan B ready to go.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah, that was always you should always know, like, if you were gonna head out to a certain field to prep it for planting, you always knew what other fields you were going to go to or you could have gone to, and so you might hit a wet spot. Maybe there's a wet spot out there. Okay, you get that far, either go on the other side of it and keep working or go to a different field. It didn't matter, but yeah, plan B, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So, let's jump into your time in the Marines because you actually have an interesting, I guess, story or way that you actually decided to go into the Marines because you kinda looked at all the branches. So, let's talk about how you decided to go into the Marines and what that how that transpired in your life. Tell us about that time period.
The easiest answer is really the fact that my cousin Bob that I worked with, had been in the Marine Corps for 60 to 64, and he was stationed out at El Toro in California, working on the F-4 Phantoms and the A-4 Skyhawks. And I don't know, for whatever reason, he liked to party and he liked to go out and go surfing after he was off. But he told me, he says, "Whatever you do, never, ever, 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 ever go in the Marine Corps." So, being I was probably 14, 15 by then, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me? That's what you gotta do." It's kinda like, a kid in a candy store. You leave that candy bar alone. Don't you touch that. you know? So that's really what it was. I had a friend of mine said, "Hey, let's see about enlisting in the army." And I don't know that I even put this in a book. And I said, "Yeah, I don't want to go in the army, man." I said, Marine Corps is they're the bad guys. They're the ones that anyhow, it's tougher, it's harder. And I'd already been toughened and hardened up. That was my life. That's what I did. And we went down to Fort Leonard Wood, and they were doing Army Basic down there. And I saw a bunch of tanks going by. This might not be too bad. Yeah, okay. Well, we went up to the MEP Center in Chicago, took the train up there, and they checked me out, and I was 40% colorblind, and I was recouping still a little bit, not too bad, from my broken right ankle in that feeding auger accident that should have ground me up like hamburgers. So I was pretty fortunate. And I got to the end and I'm ready to keep going. They said, "Oh no, we can't take you. You got a broken right ankle and you're 40% colorblind." I mean, this is how it really happened. And then about 8 weeks later, I took another guy that I knew and I said, "Hey, I'm gonna go up and enlist in the Marine Corps." And I didn't know if I'd make it. I mean, I figured, I mean, I don't know, the Army rejected me, but, I wanted to go in the Marine Corps. And my mom and dad didn't want me to, my mom in particular, because, Vietnam was the television war and they were sending 300 bodies home a week. Later on, it was 4 and 500 a week. We got up there and I went through the whole cycle of things and the, the, uh, the guy at the end says, "Okay," he says, "you can go on ahead and go in and swear in, and you're gonna be sworn in." I go, "They're gonna take me?" And he says, "Can you shoot?" I said, "Oh, yeah, heck yeah, I'm a farm kid, I can shoot." I said, "I love shooting moving targets." He said, "You're in the Marine Corps. Go right in there." And that was really what happened, and then I didn't I enlisted them, but I didn't go for a few more months because of my grandfather's heart attack, but really it started out because my cousin told me not to.
You seem like you were a guy who wanted a challenge in life, and you wanted
Well,
the biggest challenge.
why not? You're only gonna live one well, I was gonna say you're only gonna live once, but I've proven that wrong,
Right, right. So tell us more about you got into the Marines, and I know there's a certain point in there, I guess maybe where you had your first accident. or something in that. Do you wanna touch on that? Because I think this is kinda where things kinda start to shift a little bit, I guess, for you as far as your experiences with the medical and accidents and stuff like that.
Well, what really shifted was it changed my life, because I always thought I would farm and I always thought I would fly. I started flying when I was 14 years old. I soloed when I was 14 in an old 1947 Taylor craft, and so I was flying already. So I thought I'd be an ag pilot and a farmer. But on the night of November 12th, 1969, just happened to stop by a guy named Stitz's house, Corporal Stitz. He was in my CID unit, and he worked for me, and I just I don't know, I just stopped, and it was on I believe it was a Thursday night, and, make a long story short, 3 guys found him and knew that he was tracking them for criminal intelligence for drug use. They started to beat him, they cut his head open pretty good, down past his ear, cut his ear about half off, down into his neck, missed his jugular. He'd been married 6 months, his wife was there for about 4 months. I got to the house, I heard a scream, I went on through the house, out the back, down to the right, I went towards the screaming, and find out I gotta find what this is, and they weren't in their house, so I figured, "Okay, maybe that's got." I didn't know, and I came a corner, and here, one of the guys that we got later on, well, they got later on, which we were already tracking, but we got the name in, I saw him run, and, Stitz was on the ground, he was pumping out blood, and just long story short, I got him in the car, fireman carry, military, got him in the car, I put his wife in the middle, put her wrapped her right arm around his head and his neck the best she could, and take a towel that had her get and put a compress or put a pressure bandage against this whole side of the head because he was bleeding. He was I you don't know how long they're gonna I know because I bled out then a few years later in an accident myself. But on the way there, a semi was driving to pull out from an orange packing plant alongside the road. Dark. He had no side lights, no markers, no reflectors. Everything was dirty. They said he had one headlight working. Well, the headlight was off over here anyhow. I wouldn't have seen the headlight to begin with. And I had a full bird colonel directly behind me. And there were 4 cars behind us. There was 5 running together, I believe it was. And but they all made statements, and this colonel said if he hadn't hit him, I would have hit him. He said, but we hit him in the drivers. He was pulled across the road and turning right in front of traffic, and it wasn't. I mean, they said I had skid marks about 40 to 50 feet, roughly, but the car, it was a 1966 Galaxy 500 XL that went from about little over 17 feet to under 10 feet.
Wow.
Just like that. And then it caught fire under the hood and under the dash and the trunk, and so 3 other Marines on their way to Oceanside that were in staging battalion going to Vietnam, they saw, this something up ahead, a glow, and then when they got there, they could see the car was on fire, and they bailed out to get us out, and we were the only well, we were in civilian clothes. They didn't know we were Marines. Maybe they could judge by the haircut, but the car was on fire. The only light they had to work with was the fire under the hood, my leg that was on fire under the dash, and the trunk, and that was their to touch, and they couldn't get the door open. And anyhow, they finally got me out the window, and I'm gonna go see the gentleman here in a week and a half. He's still alive, the last living Marine that helped get me out, and because I don't know that he's gonna make it another year. But how do you and we didn't connect till about 10 years ago. They thought we'd stayed dead because when he pulled us out, they couldn't tell if we were dead or alive, but they figured dead just because of they had to dig my face and head out of the steering wheel, and then Linda, they pulled her out of the middle. The spare tire ripped loose, came up, took off the back top of her head, as I understand it. She slid up over the gear shift and ripped out her lower stomach part. She was in a coma 18 months and died. She passed away. And then Roy Stitz, he wasn't broke up like I was, but he was burned over 60% of his body. And he passed away from a heart attack a year ago this coming June. But anyhow, I did the coma. Well, I died on them and they couldn't get me back. And then the guy got me to where I could spewed blood out of my tracheotomy. I got here and did the coma for about a month approximately. And they put me back in a induced coma for another couple of weeks. And it was just, it was a I spent a whole year. Well, I spent a year and 18 days in the hospital.
Wow.
Year
Wow.
and 19 days.
So you were in the Marines at this time. Uh,
Yes,
at
sir.
what point? At what point? Actually, we talked about you, being in the wheelchair, and I know I kind of know a little bit of the story about how that kind of happened. But for our audience out there, explain how you're in fit, you're a Marine, you've had this accident, your first really big experience now with well, you said you they had to bring you back to life. Where did the accident come in that actually put you in the wheelchair?
Well, I will go to accident number 2 because that happened 4 years later, about less than 4 years after the first one, and a drunk hit me almost head on and took the engine out, took the left side of my car off. He got thrown out of his pickup truck and killed, run over by his own truck, no seatbelt on. I had my seatbelt on and rode multiple times down into a ditch, and the left pillar that holds your windshield in stuck me in the shoulder, broke the bone out the back of my arm, severed my deltoid muscle, broken ribs again, punctured lung, broken legs again, left leg, and, I was trapped real bad in the car. I kinda remember I remember the impact, and I remember, the noise was just incredible, rolling and flipping, and this it was and I remember glass in my mouth, but I remember the blood was just pumping out fast, and that I bled up. I mean, I was going up into the sky and
Hmm.
eventually looked down at the people that showed up about a half hour. It took them almost a half hour to get there because this is out in the middle of the cornfields of Northern Illinois. There's nobody around. Small towns didn't have, the closest small town was about 5 miles away. And you got to find somebody to go there, then find somebody. They didn't have the stuff they've got today and cell phones and pagers. You know where to go to get something because if the people are out of state, they don't know. But then I started a couple other companies. I worked for a company that I finally walked away from, but then, on July 4th, 1981, I'd been working for 5 months for a company called GTE, which was the Yellow Pages and Phone Company, and, I was in the Yellow Page portion of it and doing really good. On July 4th, 1981, I was married 3 weeks the day that it happened, but I jumped in a swimming pool. We'd gone to a 4th of July parade, and we played volleyball that day, and I'm real competitive. This happened up in a suburb of Minneapolis, about 10 miles south of Minneapolis. And later on, somebody said, "Hey, so and so's got a in-ground pool." And they just put it in, let's go down there and go swim. I said, "Yeah, yeah, sounds good." So my wife got in the back. We took my motorcycle, went down around the block. And when I got there, I think there was three guys were going to throw me in the pool, just horsing around. And I said, "No, no, 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 this isn't happening." I had my pointy toe ostrich full quill Lucchese cowboy boots on and my billfold. And I said, "And those boots are not going in the water. I will no, you don't wanna mess with this. No." And so I got the boots off, stuck the billfold in, they come rushing to me, and I jumped in the water. And I landed wrong, landed probably too stiff-legged, and it was a compression fracture, drove my spine down. I'll say something about that as well while I'm here. My back always was bad because my back I laid in traction for 8.5 months, and my back pain was always terrible in that hospital bed in the Marine Corps, and it was still bad. It was still not good, and my neck hurt quite a bit, but they didn't find anything. I don't remember any loss of movement when I came out of my comas, but when I jumped in, the doctors later on in my surgeries later on throughout life, they believe that that accident in California probably weakened those vertebrae because if you're in an accident today, what do you get an attorney, the first thing they want to do is sue the other person for whiplash or spinal damage or neck damage, okay? Well, we didn't have that. We didn't have any of that. And, but I jammed down, I had contacts in, and they think maybe I threw my head back as well, but a combination. I just remember floating in the water and wonder what's the deal. And I've kind of felt like one of those movies you watch where somebody's in outer space, kind of floating around like they're just floating off to Neverland. And that's kind of what it felt like is I was just under the water. I watched people dive in over me. I saw people swimming over me, and I was floating down to the deep end. I jumped in about 3.5 feet of water when I was finished, I was down at the deep end, which was about 9 to 10 feet. I
Mm,
never had any clarification, but I I I don't remember any pain. I don't remember any I just know I couldn't get back to the surface. I
mm,
didn't understand why. But I couldn't move either, but I never thought about a broken neck. I never even crossed my mind in a million years. But I held my breath. Apparently, a couple of people later on I heard were gonna jump in and see if I was okay. And they said, "No, man, he's a crazy old Marine. He can hold his breath for a long time. They go through waterproofing and all that. He'll be okay. And if you get a hold of him, he's gonna grab a hold of you and he ain't gonna let go." And, which was a lie because I would have been welcome. So, but if that's what was said, but anyhow, when I drowned, you can only hold your breath so long. You can sit there today and think I can hold it. Well, when you're drowning, you actually hold it longer, but then your body just screams, you got to breathe. And so I probably breathe through my nose and my mouth both. I don't know. But when I drown, I can tell you what drowning sounds like exactly. And when you drown, it's like if you've been in a swimming pool and somebody's come up to you and yelled in your ear, "Hey, Gaston, let's go get an ice cream cone." It's like blah, 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 blah. You can't really understand. And that's what it's like when you drown. Within a second, I was gone. It was quiet.
wow.
It was, and I don't remember any tube or any light at the end of a tunnel or a tunnel, but I did feel like I was inside like a cyclone or inside when they do those movies, it shows like the circular action of a tornado,
Right.
like you're
Yeah.
inside a
Yeah.
tornado, the vortex. That's
Hmm.
what I felt. I felt like I was inside a tornado, just going faster and faster and faster and faster. And I knew there was an end, but I couldn't see an end. It wasn't there. Well, in the meantime, a gal had jumped in because I was starting to turn colors. I was darkening. My body was darkening. It had been about 7.5, 8 minutes approximately. So I'd been drowned for 2.5, 3 minutes, give or take. Nobody was sitting there with a stopwatch. Some guy saw her struggling and realized there was a problem, and so he went in too, and they got me over to the side, and next thing I knew, it was 4 or 5 days later, and the
Yeah.
doctor was telling me what happened.
So you actually had, I just kind of want to go back real quick to your second accident because you mentioned that you kind of saw from a distance above what was
Mhm.
going on. So
Right,
you had that incident, and now with the drowning, you're in this cyclone, this vortex. You're feeling this. So
right.
you're having these two experiences. Maybe you can. What did those feelings? What did those feel like when you're actually in those moments? Do you remember? Do you recall what you felt?
A little bit. I don't try to get too detailed on it, Dustin, because the Marine Corps, I was out of my body up against the inside of the ceiling, looking down, and everything was red and everything was very violent. Because the 3 doctors that were working on me were walking away. They given up on me. And another doctor came in, and he was an oral surgeon, Navy oral surgeon. So he it was in his dress whites, and he said, "What's going on?" They said, "Can't we got no pulse, we got no heart, we got no breathing, we got nothing. He's look at it. I mean, my jaw was broken out here. I had 32 facial fractures, like I said. My skull was crushed in some. My hair was burned off. I had a little burn here. My leg had been burned. My femurs were broken. My left foot was turned backwards. I mean, I was punctured lungs,
Mm,
the whole shot. So but my back was against the ceiling, but that was very violent, because I wanted to kill him. I wanted to kill him, and I was
sure.
cussing and swearing everything I could because I wanted to reach. I felt like I was alive in my body. I felt like I was alive, but nobody was gonna do anything. And then when he cut the tracheotomy, the blood just went and spewed out. Well, what had happened was my heart had been compressed so much from the lungs being punctured, apparently, at least that's what I was told later on, and the heart wouldn't beat because there it was under so much pressure. So no blood pressure, no heart sound, no pulse, I had no breathing, but the one up in the sky and the second one, I was ascending. I could hear voices. I could hear, I don't know if they were angels, I couldn't tell you. But I felt calm, I felt peaceful. And in neither of those accidents, the cars, did I feel any pain. I felt no pain at all. None. And when they started giving me blood from a couple of guys up on the road, they took the old, I can't think what we called it in the Marine Corps, body to body transfusion,
Mhm.
and so they were just trying to keep blood going in me, patch me up the best they could. But I was so trapped in back under the steering wheel, they had to try cutting all that out and cut me out. Because, like before, except they had to pull me out from the passenger side instead of the driver's side, because the driver's side was leaned down kind of sideways. But the fourth time, I felt pain when he was telling me about that I had broken my neck, drowned, and I was in a Gardner and Wells tongs, bolted my skull here and here with a device that goes over your head, and I was in a
Mhm.
circle bed. And he was telling me this. Now I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. And it was 4 or 5 days later. I even called my ex-wife and asked her, "Do you remember how long that was?" And she said, "No." That's a long time ago, but the pain felt like my body was on fire and I was being stabbed by 1,000 people with ice picks, and that was the nerve damage from the spinal cord is what it was, they told me later on. And, I mean, if you walked by 15 feet away, just walked by, that little bit of air movement, oh my god, the pain was, you know
So you obviously we talked about this earlier, your lesson that you learned from being on the farm. And I maybe ask you the same question about your time in the Marine Corps. What's the one big lesson that you learned coming out of the Marine Corps that stayed with you through life now?
It's always too soon to quit. It's always too soon to quit. I stayed busy just like I did on the farm. I stayed busy. I mean, things that Dustin, that they won't, I would bet you $1 million they wouldn't let you do this today. But I used to have the tracheotomy, the tube, right? And this is after I came out of the induced coma. I used to suction my own tracheotomy out. I turned a little pump on because my arms and hands worked. And I turned a little pump on. It was a little old dirty thing, had a belt on it, and that was nasty. And I'd take that tube and I'd stick it down and inside my lungs until it hurt. I could feel it where it hit in my lungs and suction my own thing out. As time went on, my third-degree burn that you'll see a picture of in the book, they finally cut it off, and then it got a hard crust all over it. And they do what they call debride it. They peel it up on the side with a scalpel, and it really there's no pain to it because you're the burn burned all the nerves. You don't have any nerve pain, and but every day I would soak it with. Well, it would be in betadine soak. I'd unwrap it. I'd snip the skin, pull the skin off, snip it free, take the tweezers, put it over here. I did that for months and months and months. Give myself my own shots, and I hated it when they gave me, penicillin shots because penicillin hurts. It hurts. So I thought if anybody's gonna hurt me, I'll hurt myself.
Right.
But the one thing that terrified me in laying there in traction all those months or for several months was when my jaws were wired together and they'd refixed all that with intermaxillary wires down here on the left side of my Navy rack, they don't call it some people call it a bed, but it's not a bed, it's a rack, right? You know? And, but they had a pair of things that would jam into your teeth, break what teeth that weren't already broken out, and rip your jaws in half. But before they did that, there were side cutters that they would cut the wires all off. So if I was vomiting or going to drown in my own vomit, they 2 or 3 corpsmen would get on you immediately, snip the wires, do this, jam it in, break your jaws apart, you know,
Wow.
so and I always thought, "My god, what if I get sick as hell?" It's like but that's something I don't talk about. I forget about that. There's so many little things that happened.
Yeah. So how do you I mean, you've gone through a lot already at this point in your life,
Mhm.
through the accidents and the pool incident and having to endure what you had to go through just to be where you are at that point.
Right.
So how do you continue to keep going? And then you go on to be an entrepreneur, you go on to create and work with several companies. How do you do all that while maintaining I guess how do you do all that?
You just don't quit. I mean, I don't have there really isn't an explanation except that you've got an inner drive. And my mom and dad came and visited me. I was in the house in the rehab institute about maybe 2.5 months, and I'd been in the hospital 2 months. It was about 4.5 months, 4.5 months after I broke my neck. My mom said something about how you doing. I said, everything's good, and I'm moving along a little bit. My left arm was starting to move and my left leg barely, but a touch. And they told me that I would probably never move and I'd be paralyzed from the shoulders down. And I told them then I was going to walk. I was going to walk out. And I'd had a man say a prayer for me. My wife, I want to go back to that because it's an important part. I had a man, my wife came to me and I was in the circle bed. This was right after the doctor left that told me I was never going to move again or probably never move. And they had me face down, and she said, "I've got a man here whose son's in the hospital." And I met him the the rest area, the what do they call that? Where the guest room, whatever it's called. And she said he'd like to say a prayer for you. And I said, and she said, if that's okay, blink your eyes a couple of times. So I did, and I whatever prayer he said, I'm sure was a good one because I mean, the man came back and saw me a lot. And he went to a church that had about 5,000 people, and he would go to they had 3 services on Sunday, and he would go to every service and ask for prayer for me from the whole church. He'd stand up and my mother did it from our church and so on. And I believe in my heart 100% that my acceptance of that prayer that day offset what the doctor told me and allowed me to continue on and eventually walk. I believe that with all my heart because I I'm an overachiever. I'm an overdoer. I'm ADHD. I mean, I'm TBI. I'm always doing something. I believe it's like the Navy's got, or the military's got air, land, and sea, or the Navy goes by the trident, right? So I believe always in having 3 businesses, having 3 things going at one time. Both 2 may be doing great and one's medium. That's great. But one might be doing good, one's doing bad, one's doing medium. 2 are doing bad. It gives you something to do. You're always occupied. And it gets back to busy hands, busy mind. If you don't have to, if you're really tied up doing something, Dustin, it's like if I'm in a lot of pain, but I'm sitting there and I'm working on this mouse and I'm really studying and I can't figure it out. I'm checking YouTube and I'm looking on this. I'm trying to call. I kind of forget about my other problems. I
Mhm.
forget about my pain. And so how did I do that? I mean, you got to remember too. I mean, on top of this, after I got out, after I broke my neck and after I was even walking barely with leg braces and all this other stuff and crutches and canes eventually, I did that for about 17 years and then I had more brainstem surgeries and then that put me on a walker because I couldn't walk without I couldn't walk at all. I mean, I still had leg brace on my right leg, um, but I was on a walker for about 18 years, 17 or 18 years, and then things got too bad and they replaced my knee the 3rd time, and between that, my inability to get it to realign itself and my paralysis, which my right leg's never worked. It's never worked at all.
Mhm.
But everything was just getting bad. My back pain was getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And I've had 15 back surgeries. So somebody that says they got 1 or 2, I feel for them, but I don't wanna hear about it. It's like, I really don't.
Yeah.
But to answer your still, to kinda get into your question, I never quit going. I mean, it's like I went back to work. And I mean, there's an old saying, if somebody that's fallen down and gotten back up is stronger than someone that's never fallen. And I've probably fallen 1,000 times. I mean,
Right.
I've had stitches in my wrists and my knees and all that because of falling, of tearing stuff up, of being hurt. And I'm sure that didn't help my left knee at all, even though it was damaged in the Marine Corps, because I fell on it so much and it hurts. I mean, the worst pavement to fall on is chip and seal, where they put the tar down and spread
Yeah.
the rocks on top. When you fallen on that, you knew you fell on some crap. Falling on a lawn isn't anything. It
There's a guy by the name of I don't know if you heard of his name. His name's Les Brown. Yeah. So he goes, "Well, when you fall, fall forward so you can at least do a push-up on the way up."
yeah. When I was paralyzed, well, I only had one side that worked. I
Right.
understand. But, so much of it, you gotta remember I kept having surgeries throughout all of the time that I was starting businesses, and I stayed with GTE. I took over problems. I was a problem solver, and, I had you'll get to the point in the book where I had a promotion I really wanted, and it was going to be in Lexington, Kentucky. A guy by the name of Garl Benz, long since deceased. And Garl said, Jay, the job's yours. You've proven yourself time and time and time again. You're a problem solver and all this. The job's yours. But I'd really like you to do me a favor, and that's stay a district manager. Stay a district manager because you're the only one that can go out, it seems like, and solve these problems. I need that sergeant, that Marine Corps sergeant out there that's not afraid of anything, that's willing to take on the challenge and go out and do stuff and fire people and hire people and train people and do what you do because you are a leader. You create a job. You keep moving forward and others follow you. And you work with people and you're good with clients. You're good with our customers. And see, a lot of people don't know it, but GTE back when I got retired when I was 41. They put me on long-term disability when I was 41. But prior to that, GTE, we entered into a contract. We started out a company called GTE MobileNet and GTE Cellular. They were the first cellular companies in the nation, and we had the only satellite in orbit. So when AT&T used to say, "We've got better service than GTE does," we would laugh and say, "We own the satellite. Do you think we're gonna give you more access to our satellite than we got?" No, think about that statement. But what happened was GTE, right after left, within about a year, we split everything down. Half of GTE, the teleops, most of the teleops became a company you know as Verizon, okay? And the rest of it became a company called Pioneer Telephone Company, which is the largest little independent phone company for small areas in the United States. And then the Yellow Page portion became a company called Media Arc, and then Super Media Arc, it changed another name, and they kept moving on. And they still publish Yellow Pages. But there's a lot of people still use Yellow Pages. You know, when they put me out to pasture, I mean, I was financially sound. I had no reason to go back to work. None. I didn't need to, but I want to do something. I want to do something with my life. I want to do something to help other people. I like it. I enjoy it. You know, it's like so we did one company and that one went what the company I started didn't do as the way I wanted, so I had to change it a little bit and we grew and we grew and we grew and we grew into we were sending stuff all around the world. And you know, you'll see on it. But in the meantime, through all of that, I went through MRSA staph infection where I should have died. There's only 20% survival rate of that. And I was in my 50s when I went through that. And then, more surgeries. And 5 years ago, I had COVID Delta, and I should have died from that. I spent 5 months in the hospital, in 4 hospitals, and they had told my wife to, as far as I've been told, to go home and make my funeral arrangements. I went in on a Monday, and they didn't. I was 71. I was an old
Wow.
man, you know, but
They
I was
obviously did not they obviously did not know who they were talking to.
well, what's funny about that, and to jump off your comment and smile, is the gentleman that let me out, the pulmonologist that let me out of the hospital about 5 weeks later to go to the next hospital, he sat down in the bed and and I was still on oxygen and stuff, and he said, "You would mouth to me on occasion, like, 'Am I gonna make it, or am I gonna,' and I didn't wanna tell you, but in my heart, I'm going, "No, no, you're,"
Mm.
'cause they just didn't have luck. That it was not and I was not in the age category that ever made it. And, but he said, "Every time you do it, you would say, 'I'm gonna kick its effing ass. I'm gonna beat this effort.'" And,
Mhm.
he said, "You got mad as hell. You got mad." And I asked your wife one time, "Why does he swear so much?" She said, "He was in the Marine Corps, he's a Marine." But I swore before I went in the Marine Corps. I just got better at it. But the thing is, he said, "Jay, I believe it was your attitude and your mindset, your attitude that you weren't going to quit, and that's what saved you." I believe that with all my heart.
So at what point did you I think, doing some reading and some other research is you've been encouraged to write the book. At what point did you actually sit down and say, "Okay, I need to get this story out"? What made you
Yeah.
decide to do that?
I had a guy that worked for a company that I went through a thing with many, 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 many years back in '76, way before this guy was ever there. His name was Mark Pansiera with the Pacific Institute, and Lou Tice started a thing, and it was kind of about mindset and all that, but back in our days, it was called attitude, like, you remember when you're younger, somebody gets out of line, they need an attitude adjustment, you either took them out and got them drunk or you slapped the crap out of them. It was one of the 2, maybe both,
Right?
but they say, "Okay, all right, you got my attention." Um, I had been through a thing, I don't even remember how I got to it. It was a 2 or 3-day seminar by Lou Tice, and he didn't really tell me anything I didn't already know. In other words, about attitude, perseverance, stay with it, don't give up, have plan B. I lived that. That was my life. It really was my life. It's like the Marine Corps really didn't, yeah, they taught me a few things, but they just pounded into my head what I'd already knew. I was raised well. I really feel that way. And Mark Pansiera, uh, I somehow he got a copy of a podcast I'd done for a guy out of Atlanta, Georgia, that had heard I had been deceased 3 times and they got me back. And it was like a 25-minute podcast. Well, he'd listened to it and got a hold of me. And they had a thing in Florida, in Tampa, and I know it's in the introduction of the book where he puts it in that I attended this thing. Well, I did attend it, but I didn't attend it to go to it. It was on, I can't remember what they had some fancy terms for it, but I attended it because he wanted me to talk a little bit about what it takes to keep moving forward and never giving up. That's why I was there, you know? And it was a 3-day deal, and it was, it was cool. Everything was worked out fine. I can't remember, you were asking about, well, anyhow, so he was here 2 years ago in August, coming up August, and, or maybe in July, and, he was gonna be in San Antonio, and he said, "Hey, I'd like to come out. I'm gonna come out and, actually sit down, meet you. I wanna interview you. I'd like to, let's go out for supper." And, when we went out for supper, I was transferring from my wheelchair was broken and I was on a scooter. And it's
Mhm.
harder for me to get around on a scooter than it is in my wheelchair, actually. And so I was transferring to the chair at the restaurant we were at, and, my wife held some of it, and we got over onto it, and, he said he was watching that and that process of, my grimacing and from pain and the back pain and whatever, and then later on, a little bit later, he actually said to me, he said, "Do you ever feel sorry for yourself at all?" And my wife and I looked at each other like, "Why would I do that?" I know, I've never been asked that. I've never even thought that. So anyhow, we came back, we did the interview the next day, and he said, "Jay, you need to tell your story. You've been through people don't understand. I mean, a lot of people don't go through much of anything. And as woe is me, I can't do that." And and I know we're not getting into a lot of it. And I've been asked back on several places, podcasts 2 and 3 times. And I've got a couple more coming up that want to get into the more of the entrepreneurial because I look at it a little bit different. I look at it from a never give up. And a question I was asked by a company called McCoy's, because we were building houses till 2.5 years ago. That was kind of a fluke. You'll get to that point in the book too, where my wife said, "Hey, let's build a fishing cabin." I mean, we hadn't done anything for 6 months. It was time to do something. I was bored.
Mhm.
I got to be busy, and I was doing some stuff, but I found out that a fishing cabin was easier to build a small house. So we built a 107 square foot, 2-bed, 1-bath house. She did a lot of the work. She did the trim work. She did the electrical. She did the tile work, and
Wow.
she enjoyed it. She really enjoyed it. But it was, and she liked it so much the day before we sold the house, she slept in the house overnight. She slept in the house. But it sold for full price, and we had four full price offers. And so we thought, well, the next year we'll build another 1 or 2. Well, we built 4, then we built 12, then we built 16, but we built them very, very, very good. And we didn't build big ones. That's the problem. Too many people want to build 3,000 square foot, 5,000 square foot, 8,000, but they don't put any quality into it. It's just
Mhm.
throw it up. And, um, it's I want, and we paid attention to the detail, Dustin, and I'm gonna get on this for just a second because it's like we didn't do doorknobs, we did door handles because of people that have arthritis or paralysis, or if your wife comes in and you got the grandson with her and a bag of groceries, she can hit the door handle with her elbow and open the door, okay? Or ramps if you got disability. Let's concrete and put a ramp in, not gonna cost you any extra, let's just
Mhm.
do it, you know? But the detail in the house, every home we built was a custom. I mean, even when we only built like 4 or 5 spec homes, but they were custom. They were done like the thing up in your ceiling that's,
Mhm.
the indent. We put tongue and groove wood in them and stained them and every we just wanted to make it nice.
Right. Right.
And about 70% of what we built was by referral,
Wow.
which is good,
Yeah.
and a lot of people we built let's say we built one for you because you and your wife are downsizing, all the kids are gone, you're gonna move into out of 3,400 square feet, and you're gonna get rid of a bunch of stuff, and you're gonna downsize to a 1,600 square foot home, 1,700, whatever. Then your son or your daughter is moved they got a job here at Texas State at San Marcos. Well, they need to build a house, so we build a house for them, or vice versa. We built one
Right.
for the kids, and then we build them for the parents, and some of them we built 2 or 3 homes because some people they went into 1,000 square foot. Now I want a 1,700. So build me another one. I think it's the joy of helping other people. I think it's the feeling you get from doing a quality job, and I think that God put me here and he's kept me breathing and my heart beating to keep going, and it's always too soon to quit. I believe that with every bit of my heart. I mean, I've got so much on my mind right now of things I've gotta do and wanna do and I'm going to do, and I've already got things started to make sure they've done, I'm not gonna quit.
You touched on something I think was really important, and you talked about serving, about how
Mhm.
important it was to serve other people, and I think that's such an important aspect of life that I think a
Oh,
lot
it
of
is.
people overlay. They don't get that part about serving because we live in a world today where it's like gimme, 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 gimme. But if we take the time and start instead of doing that and start seeing what we can give back to other people, how we can serve other people. And you mentioned it's a feeling that you get inside. It's not a selfish feeling. It's like contributing to somebody to do
No,
something else.
it makes you feel good. As a matter of fact, it's almost being selfish if you look at it because it makes you feel so good. And where I learned that was on the farm
Mm,
because we always helped our neighbors. If a neighbor was sick, if you were sick and you lived 3 miles down the road, we made sure you got a big giant pot of, I don't know, chicken noodle soup or 3 big meatloaves and potatoes and stuff for 2 or 3 meals and some cherry cobbler or peach cobbler or
mhm,
something, for your family. Or if you lived 5, 6 miles away and you'd been in a corn picker accident, you had your leg ripped off, okay? We made sure all your crops were taken in. We made sure all that was so it was a community effort. The town we lived by was about, 4,200 to 4,500 people, but it was a farm town. It was basically agriculture. I mean, there were people in it that worked in little tiny factories or out of town 10 miles, but it was always a community effort. It was always helping somebody. And so, like, serving, most people say serving is like church like. Well, this is kind of like church like, really. I mean, you're serving other people. And I believe when the first business that I started, that's where I met my wife that I'm married to, she started working for me part time doing some typesetting. And we were doing graphics. Well, when we started doing graphics for big companies like ExxonMobil and Black& and Decker, and they went around the world. But we did it because it felt good, and we could use our imagination. What will make you more what will bring more clients to you? What will make your product look better? And that's serving. I think that's, it's there's a million different ways to do it. It is. It's helping somebody.
right, right. I'm gonna use a just metaphorically speaking here. There are many people today who, not in the physical sense, but in the mental sense, and that is they feel they're paralyzed in life, right? So if you were to encounter somebody right now, if you were to have a one-on-one conversation, maybe somebody right now that's watching this right now, is in that situation. They just feel paralyzed by life in general. What is something that you would guide? What's some of the first thing that you would tell this person to get them moving from where they are at?
First thing I wanna do is say, "Get up and go do something," you know? I mean, a lot of it is just getting up and being active. If you are active, it's something that I don't do. I don't go out and drive around much because of I might use hand controls, like I said, in my van. But when I go into town and we're 18, 20 miles from the closest town, really. But I see stuff, I go, well, no kidding. Or I go through town, I go, stuff, wow, that's going on. I didn't know that was, look at that over there. They tore down the theater and they got an apartment complex. And but I think it's more like, what I would have a talk to with them. What is it, if I need to, what is it that you have done, Destin? Go back to your time when you're 10 years old. What did you wanna do?
Mhm.
What did you do, you want to be a cowboy? Did you wanna be a fireman? Back when I was a kid, back in the '50s, early '50s, that everybody was wanting to be a cowboy or a fireman. Except
Right.
me, I wanted to be a farmer. But but, um, but what is it that you wanted to do? What'd you wanna do when you were in your 20s or after you got out of high school? Okay, so you work for the water department in a small town for 7 years and you got bored with it and you've just never found yourself. If you had unlimited resources within reason, okay, what is it that you would like to do? What there's got to be something out there that would make Dustin or Bob or Joe or Sally feel good about themselves.
Mhm.
Would it be helping other people? Would it be a physical therapist? Would it be being a fireman? Would it be what would, and I think I would dig into that, into their heart, into their soul, and find out what it is. And today and I'm gonna use a thing that I'll give a plug to YouTube, but if I was gonna do it, I'd say, "Hey, let's take a look at YouTube. Let's just see what you can pull up 2 or 3 real quick and say, 'Hey, look at this. What do you think of that?' Wow, I never saw that before. I didn't know that could be done." You know, or read a book. A lot can be, but a lot of people don't want to read anymore, so listen to an audible version or something. But
Right.
I think that's a lot of it. You got to get their attention. And I
Mhm.
said before about, an attitude adjustment. Sometimes it's almost like you literally need to reach across and just slap the crap out of them to get their attention. It's like, wow, I didn't realize that,
Yeah,
you know,
and I say a lot of it too is what is it kind of like along the lines of what you're talking about is what is it that you're really what's your passion? What is it that really drives you? If you could just choose that passion, that something
that's
that
what
you
I'm,
really really want to
yeah,
do, So,
yeah.
man, Jay, this conversation, I can see why people want you to come back because you're so full of wisdom and knowledge and that you've gained from the farm to through the Marines and you have gone through if somebody out there wants to get in contact with you, how can they get a copy of the book, and how can they get in contact with you?
Well, the book they can it's The Strength Within You. It's Always Too Soon to Quit. They can obviously get on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and I'm sure there's other places, but that's probably where most people get it anyhow. And I've got a website. I was lucky enough. I was trying to find a website that kind of was representative of me, and it came out. I typed in "never quit trying," and it came up. So I got neverquittrying.com. So I got a website. It needs to be updated, but it's got a link to a lot of my YouTubes or my, podcasts. It's got some information on it. You know, it tells a little bit. I don't know, I need to have it. It's about 6 weeks old and 8 weeks old, and I need to make a couple little changes to it, but the thing is, you mentioned something, God, I would love to go on with somebody for several things because I like to talk about life and time and how important time is and life is and how it moves you, how it moves the person you're just asking me about, but they don't want to know. They don't know what they want to do in life because they're just stuck in life and where time goes. And I just spoke about that at a bunch of seniors over here at the ROTC and other seniors in high school. There was a couple of juniors in there, about 140, 150 of them. And if I got just this minute, I'll just tell
Yeah,
them.
please. Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I went over. I was kind of at the end. The colonel for the ROTC invited me over to talk about perseverance and attitude and, you know, projecting your abilities in life. Anyhow, but towards the end of it, I said, we need to talk about time because you don't have a lot of time. Right now, everybody in here is a senior, right? Right. Okay. Okay. Got a couple of juniors back over here. Okay. All right. So I could now, with a show of hands, not yet, but how many people remember how many of all of you remember when you were in eighth grade and to be a senior, be an 18-year-old senior, you're 12, maybe 13 years old, right? Okay, you're in 8th grade. You can't even see high school, much less senior. Okay, how long how many remember that feeling that it was gonna take them ever to be a senior and get out of high school? And they all raise their hand. Every one of them raise their hand. Then I said, "Now on the alternative, think about this. You're seniors, almost every one of you is a senior. You're gonna graduate in 4, 5, 6 weeks. How long's it been since you were in 8th grade? Just like the other day? Like a couple weeks ago? Raise your hand." And virtually everybody raised their hand. And I said, "Okay, now here's the sad part. Let's talk about time. Think about time and how fast time just went. Here's the sad part. The next 20 years are going to go as fast as the last 4 because the older you get, the faster time goes." And they were just like, "Oh my God." Well, the colonel called me and the assistant principal called me on Thursday. That was a Monday, 3 or 4 weeks ago. And they told me the kids were still talking about stuff I'd said
Wow. Wow.
and said, "I can't." Yeah, it's like, I mean, I can't imagine that guy was in a wheelchair and he's like going like, "Come on, let's go." And that's life.
Yeah.
And if you gotta have a respect, but that's where there's so much out there and people don't understand, Destin, how much life has to offer them and how much they have to offer life.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
gets back to serving, that gets back to helping, that gets back to caring, to reaching out, I've got a gentleman I'm gonna see here within the next 10 days, roughly. He's getting back from a mission trip in Guatemala, way out. I mean, when he goes down, he goes way out. And the guy has no legs. He lost both his legs his 5th day in Vietnam. 5 days
Wow.
in Vietnam, lost both his legs. And he's been a pastor and a missionary for the last 45 years. He did about 10 years that things didn't go very well for him. I mean,
Mhm.
whether it was drinking, violence, whatever, it's a hard scene. But and then we're gonna visit with the last Marine that's alive that helped save me, and
Mhm.
he's not doing well, but he's still alive. And, but my point is that when Francisco, the guy, when he goes out to mission, he goes out to preach. And I asked him, I said, "Francisco, have you ever had anybody you've seen later on, brother, that you've talked to in these other countries that you went way, I mean, they need security forces to take them. They go way out. They don't, nobody,
Wow.
these people, most of them never heard about America and they're going to preach Jesus." And I said, "Have you ever had anybody come back to you that you've preached to or got to accept the Lord for their Savior and seen them later in life?" He said, "Oh, yes." He said, "Several have become doctors, some have become attorneys, some have become teachers, some of them become pastors." And he said, "And everyone has told us it's always been because we found them and helped them find Christ."
Wow. That's powerful.
That's very powerful, and so I donate to him every year, and I donate a fairly substantial sum that helps him with buying paper, buying pencils, buying sandals, because these kids have never seen that stuff.
Mm.
The young adults have never seen it. So you gotta you gotta reach out. You gotta try.
Yeah, definitely. Man, like I said, mentioned, yeah, I can see why people want you to come back because you're so full of information. One of the things, Jay, that I like to close with, that I ask
Sure.
all of my guests, is this question. And you, especially, you've gone through so much in your life, from the farm, the Marine Corps, being in the wheelchair, but you still continue to go on. You're raising twins now. My question to you is, as you know, the title of the podcast is Eagle Freedom Presents. So my question to you is, with everything that you've gone through, what does freedom mean to you now?
I just took a deep breath, and I think that's freedom. Being able to breathe deep and know that, are we in a perfect land, a perfect country? No. Are we having a perfect time? No. But boy, it sure beats the heck out of a lot of other places. So I believe that freedom is just the ability to act. I have the ability that if I want to help somebody here, I can. If I want to do this over here, I can. It's up to you. If it is to be, it is up to me. It gets back to that same saying. So freedom is the ability to act on your own beliefs. If you believe you should do something and help somebody, by all means, do it. I believe that's pretty much it. I've got something else I like to sum up something with too, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
And it's and you read it in the beginning of my book is and that's something I feel very, very, very deep about is what lies behind us and what lies ahead of us are very small matters compared to what lies within us. Because I believe what lies within you has been driven by what you've learned from the past, and you can help share that in the future, and it gives you direction.
Wow. That is awesome, Jay. That's amazing. And I just want to thank you for taking time. We're definitely going to have to get you back on the show so we can talk some more. But I really
Good.
enjoyed you taking us on this journey. And for our listeners out there, again, the name of the book is called "The Strength Within You." And my question to you is, for the audience out there, what is your strength? What is that keeps you going? What is it that drives you? Be sure to drop it in the comments. Jay, any last comments before we wrap things up for our time here today?
I just remember you do have a strength within you. Everybody that is listening, you got a strength within you. Is that pain? Is it aggravation? Is it frustration? Is it your family? Is it faith? There's always something in you to help you become resilient to get through those obstacles and over those adversities and keep moving forward in life, and just never quit. It's always too soon to quit. Never, 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 ever quit.
All right. Well, Jay, I want to thank you first and foremost for your service to our country, for your dedication to our country. I know you're still very involved in the Marine Corps and what you do. And I want to thank you very much. Yep, you got the shirt on right there.
I didn't even think about it till you just I think I got one.
But anyway, I want to thank you for your service to our country. And also, again, thank you for sharing your journey and your legacy with us here on the show today.
You're welcome very much, Destin. I look forward to coming back.
All right. And for
Thank
those of you out there, remember, you too can rise, inspire, and overcome. God bless.
To learn more about our mission and become a part of #Rio Movement, visit eaglefreedompresents.com. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs a beacon of hope. If you know someone who has an amazing story of overcoming, send us an email to eaglefreedompresents@gmail.com. And remember our mantra, rise, inspire, overcome. Podcast distribution for Eagle Freedom Presents provided by Paralyzed. Visit Paralyzed.com for all your podcast needs.